Aston Martin's AMR26 arrived at 2026 testing broken, and Adrian Newey, the man earning up to £30 million a year to make this team a championship contender, may be at the centre of how it unravelled. Newey officially started at Aston Martin on March 1st, 2025, and by that point Honda's power unit for the 2026 season was already deep into its development timeline. The 2026 regulations represent the largest rules overhaul Formula One had seen in years, with hybrid power taking on a more dominant role than ever before, and getting the relationship between the chassis and the power unit right was not a detail, it was the foundation of the entire car concept. What Newey did when he looked at Honda's existing work is where this story takes its sharpest turn. Satoshi Tsunoda, Honda's F1 project general manager, confirmed publicly what had happened, and his account was striking. When Newey joined, almost everything about the power unit integration had changed. Not the engine structure itself, but every surrounding element, the peripheral equipment, the attachment points, how the unit connects to the car body, all of it redesigned, all of it at Newey's request, and all of it happening late in a development window that was already compressed. Tsunoda also confirmed that Newey pushed Honda toward a more compact overall layout, wanting the power unit as small and short as physically possible to serve his aerodynamic concept. Accommodating that request meant Honda adopted a two-tiered battery design that had not existed in the original plans, and that two-tiered arrangement is now identified as a primary source of the abnormal vibrations that damaged the battery system and turned testing into a disaster. Tsunoda's own description of the pressure was plain. Newey was asking whether Honda could do things his way, and Honda, running out of development time, chose to try. Honda reportedly asked Newey to reinforce the chassis structure to help manage the vibrations the power unit was generating, and Newey reportedly declined, because his design philosophy relies on a lightweight structure that transfers loads, rather than absorbs them. If that account holds up, the problem stops being purely about timing and becomes a direct conflict between two engineering philosophies that were never going to reach the same answer. That same month, the Aston Martin wind tunnel became operational, meaning the team's primary aerodynamic development tool was only just coming online as he walked through the door. The AMR26 did not enter that tunnel until April 2025, 4 months later than rival teams were already running their own 2026 concepts, and by the time the car made its first real track appearance at the Barcelona Shakedown in late January 2026, it had gone from wind tunnel to racetrack in roughly 9 months. Every other team had been refining their 2026 cars for considerably longer. The AMR26 arrived at Barcelona painted entirely black, not as a statement, but because the team had run out of time to apply the green livery. When Bahrain testing began, Honda confirmed what had already been managed behind closed doors. Abnormal vibrations during running were causing direct damage to the battery system, and the source of those vibrations sat across multiple interacting components simultaneously, making it almost impossible to isolate a single cause. Ikuo Takeshi, Honda Racing's managing director, said the team could not determine whether fixing one element alone would solve anything, and he described the results as extremely serious and severe. Those are not the words a manufacturer typically uses about pre-season reliability. By the numbers, the picture was just as grim. Aston Martin completed 128 laps during the second Bahrain test, the lowest figure of any team present. On the final day, 6 laps was all Stroll managed before Honda's spare parts ran dry and the session ended with the clock still running. Stroll put the pace gap at 4 seconds behind the leading cars, and Alonso was 4.6 seconds off Charles Leclerc's fastest lap in the first Bahrain test. When Stroll was asked whether that gap would close before Melbourne, his answer was short. He did not think it falls from the sky. Jolyon Palmer said not a single aspect of the AMR26 was performing as designed. Martin Brundle described the correlation between wind tunnel predictions and actual stopwatch times on track as miles out. Everything up to this point already constituted a serious pre-season problem, and then the F1 Commission meeting happened at a gathering of Formula One's key stakeholders in Bahrain on approximately 26 February 2026. Newey reportedly told representatives from rival teams that Honda's power unit could not recover energy, even at the 250 kilowatt lower regulatory limit. Under the 2026 rules, The maximum permitted output from the MG UK stands at 350 kilowatts, and a power unit struggling to reach the regulatory floor is not a gap that gets resolved with a software update. Telling every other team in the paddock about it before race 1 does not make the conversation with your manufacturer any easier. Reports from Japanese media described a clear deterioration in the working relationship between Honda and Aston Martin following those comments. When a team's entire pre-season recovery depends on that manufacturer diagnosing and fixing a fundamental reliability problem before the opening round, airing those shortcomings in front of the competition introduces a dynamic that is difficult to walk back. Honda's public response was measured, but the language was not reassuring. HRC President Koji Watanabe acknowledged that the wall they face as a result of the tests is certainly a high one, and no denial came with it. No suggestion that a straightforward fix was available. The honesty in those words made the situation sound more serious, not less. What emerges from the combined picture is two organisations that needed to operate as a unified technical partnership for the most demanding regulatory change in recent Formula One history, now openly at odds over the causes of their shared failure. Newey has since delegated the power unit work to Andy Cowell, the former Mercedes engine chief who joined Aston Martin in late 2024, while directing his own focus toward the chassis, and whether that split accelerates the fix or simply confirms that the relationship between the two sides has fractured is something Melbourne will begin to reveal. Drawing a clean line from Newey's arrival to the pre-season disaster is tempting, but the full picture does not support that cleaner narrative. Honda's issues with 2026 did not begin when Newey showed up. Before he had signed with anyone, Honda had already announced they were leaving Formula One ahead of the new regulations, then reversed that decision, and the exit and U-turn disrupted their development program in ways that left them behind the other 4 power unit manufacturers before a single packaging discussion had taken place. The vibration problem that caused the testing collapse only appeared in real-world running conditions. Honda's own dyno test did not detect it, which raises a separate question about whether the pre-development process had gaps that existed independently of anything Newey requested. Newey's track record at regulation changes also carries weight here. In 1998, his McLaren was dominant from the start of a new regulatory era. In 2009, his Red Bull was immediately a frontrunner. And in 2022, the last time Formula One introduced a wholesale rule overhaul, his Red Bull won 15 races and Verstappen took the championship. 3 major regulation cycles across 3 decades, and he read all 3 correctly when most of the field got it wrong. Fernando Alonso's defence of Newey carries particular weight, given what is at stake for him personally. Alonso has nothing to gain from being diplomatic about a car he is driving, and his championship experience gives him a sharper view than most of when a project is genuinely broken versus when it is managing a fixable problem. His position was explicit. After more than 30 years of dominating the sport, Newey does not forget how to do his job in 1 year. Alonso also pointed directly at the chassis as the area carrying no question marks, placing the responsibility for the pre-season problems firmly elsewhere. On the 250 kilowatt figure, Honda's framing is worth considering carefully. Their argument was that the power unit ran in a deliberately conservative mode throughout testing because of the spare parts shortage and the need to protect reliability, meaning the figure Newey cited at the F1 Commission reflected a managed, protected running condition rather than the unit's actual capability ceiling. If that account is accurate, the public impression of Honda's power unit may be considerably worse than what the real performance numbers look like. The changes Newey demanded were late and they disrupted an already stretched timeline, and they may still turn out to be the right calls. A chassis concept that delivers the aerodynamic and mechanical performance he has in mind once the power unit issues are resolved could still make the AMR26 a competitive car at some point in 2026. The question sitting underneath all of it is whether the partnership with Honda survives intact long enough for anyone to find out. Did Adrian Newey ruin Aston Martin's season before it started? The honest answer is that nobody knows yet, and Melbourne is unlikely to provide a definitive one. What the evidence does establish is this. Newey arrived at a team whose wind tunnel had only just become operational, made sweeping and late changes to the power unit integration, and those changes are connected to the vibration problems that produced the worst testing performance of any team in the field. The relationship with Honda has reportedly deteriorated, and the team are potentially 4.5 seconds off the leading pace with the opening race days away. None of those facts disappear when you argue for the other side, but neither do the counter-arguments. Newey has been right about regulation cycles when the entire field got it wrong. Honda carried pre-existing vulnerabilities into 2026 before Newey influenced anything, and Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull did not all enter a bidding war for a designer whose best work was behind him. The version of events where Newey's ambition outran the available timeline is fully supported by what happened in testing, and the version where this is a painful, temporary period of development for a team that will be competing at the front by the middle of 2026 is supported by Newey's career record and by the direct assessment of a two-time world champion sitting inside the car. What is not supported is the idea that the stakes here are manageable. Fernando Alonso is 44 years old and his contract expires at the end of this season, leaving almost no room for a patient rebuild. Lawrence Stroll has committed extraordinary resources to a project that has not yet produced results that justify them. Honda will have a limit to how long they accept a situation where their power unit is being discussed openly at the F1 Commission as struggling to meet regulatory minimums before a race has been run. And the 107% qualifying rule, which requires both cars to set a lap within 107% of the fastest Q1 time, represents a very real practical flaw for just how badly things could go in Melbourne. The last team denied a grid start by that rule was HRT. Back in Australia in 2010 and 2012. Aston Martin are not HRT, but 4.5 seconds generates uncomfortable arithmetic. Melbourne starts the conversation. The Chinese Grand Prix, where Honda reportedly hopes to introduce fixes, continues it. And the relationship between Newey and Honda, between a man who wanted the most compact power unit package possible and a manufacturer who had to redesign their battery to give it to him, will play out across the rest of the season in ways that are not yet visible. Whether this is the story of a genius accepting short-term pain to get long-term performance, or an icon who arrived late, asked for too much, and made a difficult situation worse, is a question that deserves to be watched rather than answered from the pit lane in February. Leave your take in the comments and stay subscribed, because wherever this goes from Melbourne, it is not going to be a quiet season for Aston Martin.